Joseph and the Dreamcoat. Joseph and the Dreamcoat has always been a popular story for children and adults alike. However, few people realize that beneath the surface of this seemingly simple story lies a wealth of hidden symbolism and deeper meanings. When analyzed from a Gnostic perspective, the tale of Joseph becomes a powerful allegory for the journey of the human soul and the quest for enlightenment and spiritual awakening. To fully understand the Gnostic interpretation of Joseph and the Dreamcoat, it is crucial to first explore the basic principles and beliefs of Gnosticism. At the core of this ancient religious philosophy was the belief that the material world was created by a lesser, imperfect deity known as the Demiurge. This Demiurge was considered to be a false god who imprisoned the divine spark within human beings, preventing them from attaining true knowledge and enlightenment. Gnostics believed that the path to salvation and liberation was through the attainment of gnosis, or knowledge and revelation. This was achieved through deep meditation, contemplation, and the guidance of enlightened teachers or spiritual leaders. Through this process, the individual could become aware of their true nature as a divine being and break free from the confines of the material world. When examining the symbolism and themes in Joseph and the Dreamcoat, one can see clear connections to Gnostic principles and beliefs. The story of Joseph revolves around the themes of enlightenment, spiritual awakening, and revelation. Joseph himself is often interpreted as a Gnostic figure, representing the journey of the human soul towards greater understanding and awareness. When compared to other religious and spiritual beliefs, the Gnostic interpretation of Joseph and the Dreamcoat stands out as a unique and valuable perspective. While there are certainly similarities and differences between Gnosticism and other ancient mystery religions, it is clear that the principles and beliefs of this philosophy have much to offer in terms of spiritual growth and enlightenment. As told in the book of Genesis, chapters 37 through 50, the story of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is based on the biblical account found in the book of Genesis. Here's a short summary of the story. Jacob favored Joseph over his other sons, giving him a coat of many colors as a symbol of his favor. When Joseph had two dreams, in which he was elevated above them, Joseph's brothers were jealous. Joseph himself had two dreams that he shared with his family. In the dreams, he saw himself as a ruler, with his brothers and parents bowing down to him. Here are the details of the dreams. The first dream. The first dream is recorded in Genesis 37, chapters 5 through 8. In this dream, he saw himself and his brothers gathering sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, Joseph's sheaf stood upright, while his brothers' sheaves encircled him and bowed down to it. This dream was interpreted by Joseph's brothers as a prediction that he would eventually rule over them. This dream is a reflection of the rivalry between Joseph and his brothers, and foreshadows his future as a ruler. Symbolically, the dream represents a hierarchical division between Joseph and his brothers. Joseph's upright sheaf represents a higher position, while his brothers' bowing sheaves signify a position of subservience. The sheaves of grain may also allude to the material wealth and blessings that Joseph would acquire during his reign. The second dream. The second dream is recorded in Genesis 37, chapters 9 and 10. In this dream, Joseph saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. He interpreted this dream to mean he would have authority over his parents and 11 brothers. This dream initially alarmed Joseph's father, who interpreted it to mean that he and his wife would bow down to Joseph in the future. Symbolically, the dream represents Joseph's future ascent to power and influence. The sun in the dream represents Joseph's father, the moon symbolizes his mother, and the 11 stars symbolize his 11 brothers. Here, Joseph's brothers become even more envious of him, since they interpret the dream as indicating that they will be subservient to him. Genesis 37, chapters 10 and 11 states, "When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, 'What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?' His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. His brother's jealousy and his father's thoughtful consideration further emphasized the significance of Joseph's dream. Joseph's brothers plotted to kill him, but Reuben intervened and convinced them to throw him in a pit instead. Reuben was the eldest son, and he saw Joseph's dreams as a sign from God that Joseph was destined for something great. He thought that if they killed Joseph, they would be going against the will of God. Therefore, he suggested throwing Joseph into a pit instead. In the biblical story, Joseph's brothers concocted a plan to deceive their father Jacob after selling him into slavery. They dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and showed Jacob the coat, saying Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped it in blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it and see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob mourned his son for many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." Joseph's difficult journey had just begun. He was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, where he served as a slave for many years. Unfortunately, his fortunes turned for the worse when Potiphar's wife made false accusations against him. She tried to seduce him, but he refused her advances, and she retaliated by accusing him of trying to assault her. Potiphar believed his wife's false accusations and had Joseph thrown into prison. It was an unjust action, as Joseph had done no wrong and remained faithful to his master and God. Furthermore, Joseph's faithfulness was rewarded with false imprisonment, a punishment disproportionate to the crime he had not committed. While in prison, he interpreted the dreams of the Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, and eventually the Pharaoh's own dream, which led to his release from prison and his appointment as the ruler of all Egypt. The cupbearer dreamed of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he squeezed into Pharaoh's cup and gave to him. Joseph interpreted this dream to mean that the cupbearer would be restored to his former position within 3 days. He interpreted the 3 branches of the vine to represent the 3 days before the cupbearer's restoration, and the grapes to symbolize the abundance of blessings the cupbearer would receive once he was restored. The baker dreamed of 3 baskets of bread on his head, with the top basket containing baked goods for Pharaoh. However, birds ate them out of the basket. Joseph interpreted this dream to mean the baker would be executed within 3 days. Joseph believed the birds eating the bread represented Pharaoh's servants consuming the baker's life, and the 3 baskets signified that the baker would be killed within 3 days. This interpretation was confirmed when the dream came true and the baker was executed within 3 days. A troubling dream was experienced by Pharaoh 2 years later, and none of his wise men could interpret it. The cupbearer who had been restored to his position remembered Joseph and recommended him to the king. In his interpretation of the dream of Pharaoh, he advised Pharaoh to store up grain during the years of plenty as a precaution against the famine, and that there would be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. For example, he suggested that Pharaoh appoint a wise and discerning man to store 1/5 of the harvests of the 7 years of plenty, so that the country could be prepared for the famine. Pharaoh was so impressed by Joseph's wisdom that he appointed him as chief administrator, and he took control of all Egypt as well. The grain storage and distribution was overseen by Joseph during the years of plenty, and when the famine struck, people came from all over the region to buy grain. Joseph's brothers, who did not recognize him, came to Egypt to buy grain. It was this point that Joseph tested his brothers to see if they had changed since they had sold him into slavery, and in the end, he explained himself to them. They reconciled, and his father Jacob was sent to live with them in Egypt. Joseph eventually revealed his identity to his brothers, and they were filled with guilt and remorse for their past actions. Joseph, however, was full of forgiveness and welcomed his brothers with open arms. He gave them his blessing, and they all lived happily in Egypt. This story is of forgiveness, reconciliation, and redemption. In spite of the hardships he faced as a slave, and despite facing many trials and hardships, he was ultimately able to use his position of power to save his family and many others from starvation during the famine, and he stayed faithful to God. Also, Joseph's story emphasizes the idea of divine providence and that God is present and working in the world. This is even in difficult circumstances. His ability to interpret dreams and his rise to power in Egypt are seen as evidence of God's guiding hand. Joseph's story is a reminder that God's plans are often different from our own and are sometimes even beyond our understanding. God may be using hardships and obstacles to bring out something greater. Ultimately, we can trust in God's plan and be open to what is in store for us. Additionally, some scholars have noted that Joseph's story can be seen as a metaphor for the Gnostic concept of the divine spark or divine seed present in all human beings. Joseph's journey from slavery to a position of power and his ability to forgive his brothers can be seen as an allegory for the spiritual journey of awakening and liberation from the limitations of the material world. This concept is often referred to as the path to enlightenment, and it is thought by embracing this inner power of the divine spark, one can become liberated from the constraints of the material world and open up to a higher level of consciousness. Humanfluence out.